There you go. It's great to see all of you here on a weekend it rained. And the reason I say that, in the Midwest, it took 4 inches of snow to freak people out, but here it rains and Vegas doesn't know what to do. And some of you go, man, I don't think we should stay in all weekend. It's going to be dangerous or whatever. But you survived. Look what the rain washed in, whatever. But I'm proud of you for being here. And those of you watching online, you may have been one of the ones that said we shouldn't drive this weekend. And you chose to really go online, so good job for you, as opposed to saying we should go online and then you forgot. You didn't forget, good job. But you look marvelous. Second thing I just want to talk about is I haven't responded to what happened 2 weeks ago where there was this football game. And that was 2 weeks ago. Epic comeback. Yes, it was. It was a great game for some of you. Not for me. And for those all NFL fans, the season is now over, and so there's this void. And some of you are grieving, and Grief Shares Thursday nights over at the Lodge, and some of you may need to go to that. I do also want to just say, yay, God, for Night to Shine, and what an outstanding, just church-wide thing that was. We put our best foot forward. We served 130 guests with all kinds of focus and love, as well as their caregivers and 500 volunteers. It was just one of those events that everybody just loved being a part of and didn't want to leave. And when they look back on it, it just goes, oh, that was awesome. So well done, church family, and yay, God, for that. And also, I just wanted to respond about what we encouraged through the month of January as we did our first series called Impact, and we challenged people to make an impact in saying yes to the next generation by signing up and working in base camp. And we had 160 Lone Mountain folks sign up, and brand new folks who are engaging in base camp, which is a huge burst of energy, and it's adding wind to the sails of the volunteers, the staff, and also to the families whose kids are being benefited by all that new infusion of serving. And well done, there was 39 at Centennial Hills who signed up, and that's an awesome thing. And it's just good when the body of Christ responds and says yes to what God wants to do through them. So well done. And I just wanted to update us on all of that. And if you're brand new this weekend, you're catching us in a series called Margin, but I want to give the context to this series because we started the year in January with a series called Impact, Make One, Be One. And the radical idea that God made us to make a difference with our one and only life. And to keep saying that truth because our culture seems to minimize us and say you really don't matter, versus no, you matter to God, and God made you to make an impact. And we talked about embracing the challenge instead of running away from it. We talked about no excuses as opposed to we have excuse for why we're not making an impact right now. We talked about not my way, but God's way instead of making an impact the way He's calling us. And who, me? Yes, me. Each one of us has been called to make a difference with our one and only lives. Great series. We just pushed it and celebrated and raised it up and encouraged and had passion. And people we knew would go, okay, yes, I can make an impact. But we also knew that we were talking to people who were up to here with obligations and with issues. And we were saying, and on top of what you're currently doing, make an impact. And we knew for some people that would hit the tilt button, that would overwhelm them, they might drown. And we go, we need to help folks with, yes, you need to make an impact, don't say you can't, and this is how you can, but we also need for you to have margin in your life so that you can allow God to make an impact through you. And so we're following that series of Impact with Margin because we need it. Last weekend, Pastor Mark did a great job, a strong call to create margin. And margin is that part around the edge of the paper that allows you to read the book. Instead of the text being all the way to the edge, it's the part of the website that allows you to read the content. Margin is something we need in our lives so that we have room to respond. He hit a nerve, the buzz and the feedback of last weekend's talk. People say, man, did I need that. And he focused on the phrase in the Old Testament Bible verse, be still and know that I am God. And we gave space for that in our service, margin for that. And folks left just going, oh, man, did I need that. And why did the psalmist say, be still and know that I am God? Why does that speak to us today? It's because we're too busy. We're too frantic. We're too burdened. We're too stressed. And it's not that we don't like God and we don't like being still. We don't have time for it because we don't have margin. And it's like, oh, no. We are going to attack this. What's wrong with us that we keep saying yes and yes and yes and yes to more and more and more, so much that we don't have margin in our life? And the truth is, this is something that we're in charge of. It's called self-leadership. We lead ourselves, and we can lead ourselves poorly or lead ourselves well. And sometimes we just don't. We say yes to too many things, and we add and add and add. Now, I confess, and some of you are already starting to push back and say, Kevin, there are times that my life doesn't have margin, not because of choices I've made, but because of things I can't control. Something comes into my world that I didn't see coming, that I didn't plan on. We usually call it an emergency or a crisis, and it just comes, and there's an accident, and you have to respond and get a new car and go through physical therapy, or other kinds of concerns or crises come that I'm not in charge of. It's not my fault. It just came my way, and I have to deal with it. That is true. For example, you have cancer. You get that diagnosis. That changes your world. And we know that because last April, my wife was diagnosed with breast cancer. For those of you that are new, just an update so that you know that. And for those who have been following this year, you understand that it has been a different year for us. So as I just pause on that, I'm going to give you an update on Ginger because I haven't given you one in a while. And just let you know, she had her last surgery on February the 8th, a week ago Wednesday, the final phase of reconstruction, which is awesome. She's already off her pain medication, which is great. Her hair is growing back, and she looks marvelous, and she's doing great. Now, she looks good. She's sitting over there. She looks mighty fine, but just to see a picture, here's a picture of that just to show you we're back, and her hair's growing back, as you can see, and that is a birthday party for our 5-year-old grandson at Laser Blast. And just to show you that Grandma and Grandpa can be a lot of fun, here we are. We played in Laser Blast, and we had a blast. It was a lot of fun. And she's doing great. She's off pain medication. She's recovering well. It's like a finish line. There's no more surgeries on the horizon, just some drug treatment through August. But she's doing great. Yay, God. So thank you. And thank you for your support. One of the things that occurred is when this whole new set of stuff, you're going to have to go to this appointment, and this surgery, and that recovery, and this therapy, and all this stuff that all of a sudden got added to our world. How did we handle that? How did we cope? Well, we had some margin in our life, but another amazing thing happened. People surrounded us. Our life group, my men's group, our staff, our congregation came alongside and say, what can we do to help? And what really happened was our margin was made up by others. Isn't that cool? And that's one of the reasons why we want everyone to get connected in a group, to get connected in the family of God, so that when crises come and we don't have the margin to handle the crisis, others come alongside and expand our margin and handle the things that we can't handle ourselves. And that's another reason why I'm so grateful. Now, I get that margin diminishes when a crisis comes. I get that. This message isn't about handling the storm. This message is about handling our problem in creating our own crisis. Meaning many people have said yes to so many things that we live in crisis mode. We create our own crisis. We have so many things that we have to do because we said yes to so many things. Who's in charge of your schedule? You are. So next weekend, we're going to talk about the scheduling margin, scheduling your margin. And here's the reality. A lot of the people that really need to come to next weekend don't have time to. And we're encouraging you to invite them to come next weekend for something they don't have time to, because it's going to be helpful. We know that. And here's the subtle thing about our time allotment is when we are super busy, guess what it says subtly to us? If I'm super busy, that means I'm super important. If our family is super busy, that means our family is cool and hip and we just got so many things to do. It subtly means that. When somebody comes to you and say, hey, do you have time? Oh, I got nothing scheduled. You feel like, I'm not that important. Be still and know that I am God. Ooh, that's a different way of looking at being alone or having time. What I know is that we need this topic next weekend, and please bring your friends. In 2 weeks, we're going to talk about a different kind of margin, which is emotional margin or relational margin. I just can't handle another relationship. As a matter of fact, I'm burnt out, I'm fried, I'm tired, I'm exhausted. There are people that just suck the life out of me. And for folks that are feeling that way, I have no margin relationally or emotionally. We're going to talk about that in 2 weeks, and that's a tough but important weekend. But this weekend, we're dealing very practically with another one of those topics where we know we need it, but we don't want to talk about it, and it's financial margin. We don't want to talk about that because it's hard to talk about, but we're going to talk about it. And the Bible says stuff that's going to help us because we need to. Now, those households in America this last year who have credit cards, the average debt on their credit card was $16,000. The home that has an auto loan, the average home has a $28,000 debt. For those who have student loans in their household, $49,000 debt. And that's just the beginning. I could have gone all day into this evidence, but we know that there's rising prices, food and gas and utilities, and health costs. And then we proactively go after things like we get our kids involved in stuff. So there's more activities for the kids, which means there's more fees and more registrations and more stuff to buy so they can do the activity. And I can just say single moms, and already there's a category of moms living right up to here with no financial margin, and they're overwhelmed. And I could talk about families with young children who are just trying to have enough money to buy the next round of diapers, and they're thinking once they're potty trained, then we're in great shape, but then they realize they get more and more expensive as they get older. Trust me. There are some here who have financial stability and financial margin. And this really isn't your first worry when you think about life, and that's awesome. But I don't want you to check out on this weekend because I believe this topic is going to help you too, because in all honesty, God looks at finances or money as a tool, as a neutral, and it's attached to our heart. And our heart has growth and correction and maturing to do, even with everything, including how we handle money. And I think the topic is going to help us all, no matter where you are. If you're already up to here and drowning, or if you have some space you do have financial margin, I think there's something here for you. So let's dive in. If you have a program, pull out the outline, follow along. And the first one is something I want you to remember. The first thing I want to hit. You know this. People are eternal and material possessions are temporary. Jesus said this in Matthew 6:20. Store your treasures in heaven, where moths and rust cannot destroy and thieves do not break in and steal. Wherever your treasure is, there the desires of your heart will also be. We know that, but we live like we don't know it, or it seems like we forget it pretty fast. To help bring this truth home, a friend of mine who was a pastor in Ohio was trying to teach his young sons this truth, and he thought, how can I get this across to them? And how children often are objective thinkers, he thought, I know what I'll do. So he went to a store where he had a stamp made, one of those ink stamps, you stamp the ink and put it on something. And he made a stamp that said temporary. And then he came home, and he called the kids together, and his wife gave him permission. And he said, okay, guys, here's the deal. Stuff's temporary, people are eternal. Just to bring that home, I'm going to flip over the coffee table and stamp temporary on the coffee table. This is temporary, you're eternal. They went to the end tables, flipped them over, put temporary on underneath both end tables, and fellas, these are temporary, you're eternal. Now, just so you get it across, I want you to look around the house, and anything you see that's temporary, you can stamp underneath. Not on top, and just so you know that all this stuff is temporary, but you're eternal. So the kids went at it, and they went to the kitchen table, temporary, and the kitchen chairs, temporary, and all through the house. They did a pretty good job for the most part, doing the temporary where it couldn't be seen in public, and it was a great lesson. Then at the end, they got to each other, said, can we stamp each other? And the dad, being a wise dad, had to theologically dance that a little bit. Well, your soul is eternal. Your bodies are temporary. Until the resurrection, then you get an eternal body. But no, don't stamp each other. You've done enough. Why am I telling you that story? It's a very practical truth. In some ways, we need to get deeper, to be aware that people are eternal and stuff is temporary, because we can flip it. We can live our one and only life in acquiring stuff as opposed to investing in eternal. Now, we know this, but we forget. There are some things that break through our forgetfulness, and usually it's a tragedy. And we can think through news stories that we've heard before when there's been a hurricane or a tornado or a flood or a forest fire, and a family whose home's been devastated or burned away is standing there with shock in their eyes and tears, everything is gone. And the reporter will say, how are you handling this? Oh, everything's gone, everything's gone. You go, but all that stuff can be replaced. We have each other. And we go, yeah, that's right. People are eternal. Stuff is temporary. Sometimes it takes a tragedy to break through. There's a tragic story in our church family that you may not have been aware of. I was asked to help with a funeral Friday for a 16-year-old driver that was killed by a driver under the influence out of Durango and Farm Road last Thursday. Jalen's dad, Alan, had been attending Canyon Ridge since 2006. So I was asked to help with the service. It's the worst. Just the worst. Nobody wants to go to that service. Nobody wants to face the reality of that kind of tragedy and death. But here's the rest of the story. A tragedy breaks into our world. What really matters? And Jalen had attended here with his father. He went to Christian school when he was a kid. His father was convinced that he had a saving faith. And there was a deposit made in heaven by Jalen's dad. Where do you think his treasure is? It's a different way of applying this truth, but when we see it, we go, yes. We store up treasures in heaven where it's eternal, because people are eternal and stuff isn't. We know that, but we can live our life in a total different way. Why do we do that? Why do we get our eyes off the eternal and focus on the temporary? Why does it all become about our stuff? And there's something in our hearts that messes with us in a way, like our identity. Like my identity is my stuff. I could live in this house in this neighborhood, but what would people say if I live in that house in that neighborhood? I could drive this car or this truck, but what will people say if I drive that car and that truck? And we start ratcheting up the financial strain because we want the bigger, better thing. What will people say when I wear that dress or that suit or I carry that handbag? And the issue is who or what owns your heart? Who or what owns your heart? Do I own my stuff, or does my stuff own me? Meaning, do I own my stuff? I steward it, I utilize it, I enjoy it, because that's what we're supposed to do with stuff. Or does my stuff own me, where the maintenance and the protection and I can't part with it and it is me becomes too much? Do I invest my life in people or in acquiring stuff? Do I live for the eternal or for the temporary? Tough question. Be brutally honest with yourself. I've heard this phrase from a few different financial Christian planners who help us with our finances, and they say this phrase: we buy things we can't afford with money we don't have to impress people we don't like and don't know. And because we do that, we get our finances right up to here with no margin. So, is it good to remember? People are eternal, stuff's temporary. Let's go to the second big idea. Financial margin is created wisely by saving and living within your means. Financial margin is created wisely by saving and living within your means. The Old Testament wisdom of Solomon in Proverbs 21:20 says, "The wise have wealth and luxury, but fools spend whatever they get." Paycheck to paycheck, which is the majority of our culture. We know this. It's like the doctor saying to us, you need to lose weight. Well, how do you lose weight? You eat less, exercise more. We know that. Do we do it? We know that financially it is wise to save and live within our means, but why don't we do it? There's something going on in here. Now, when I was introduced to this idea called a budget, to me it was a 4-letter word. And I know there's 6 letters, so you don't have to send me an email. But it's a 4-letter word. It's like, oh, that is so, I don't want to hear it. And there's a side of me that's a free spirit. I enjoy life. I like to live the moment. I like to dream, what if, and I like to live at the edge. And when I take that whole part of me and put it into my financial world, it can lead to trouble. Is it wise? No. As a matter of fact, the Bible doesn't pull any punches. If you don't live like the wise, you are a fool. And part of maturing is coming out of foolishness and moving toward wisdom. And that's what I'm calling all of us to move toward wisdom, to save and then budget so you can save. I can't save anything. You don't know, I'm paycheck to paycheck. Budget so you can save. We embrace and partner with Dave Ramsey as a church. Financial Peace University is something we've offered several times. We've got another class coming this fall. And when Dave Ramsey starts to speak into our worlds when we're a mess financially, he says the first baby step is to get an emergency fund, $1,000. Because here's the truth, that there's another emergency coming and you don't have money for it. So the car battery dies and you don't have money for it. So what do? You put it on the card and dig the hole deeper. And for you to start to get stabilized, you need an emergency fund. So when emergencies come, you can pay cash for it and not go any deeper. And people go, I can't save for an emergency fund because I'm already living up to here. And he goes, no. We figure it out. We start by living like no one else so you can live like no one else. We're going to give every dollar a name. Every dollar that comes in your hands is going to have a name, and it's going to go to this envelope or this envelope or this envelope, and you're going to have discipline, and one of the envelopes is going to be saving. And after you save $1, then you save 10, then you save 20, and after a season you have $1,000. But it takes work. And this is where God gets involved. If God could say, I want to mature you, I want to grow you up so that you can have more of a deep, full, abundant life, I would like for you to have discipline in your life, to say yes to the most important things and know when to say no. I would like for you to have character, that you stick with something and develop perseverance. I would like for your faith to grow. And when we look at saving and budgeting, discipline, character, and faith is something God wants us to have in our heart more than we currently have. And honestly, money's a neutral. Money in and of itself is not evil. It's a neutral. God uses money as a tool to grow in us what he's always wanted us to have. Discipline, character, faith. So we recommend Financial Peace University as a tool to get going. If you go on our Margin series, there's a link, and on our link, we can link you to sign up for Financial Peace University online. We have a class coming this fall, but you can start right now online where you download the materials, you have the videos of the teaching, and you can get it going right now. And it costs you money. And Ramsey's done this for millions of people, and he has learned that instead of it being a free thing, where a church pays for free scholarships for its people to do it, that unless people put skin in the game, they won't follow through. So it's going to cost you money to get started. The first thing you're going to be asked to do is save $1,000. And you're going to be taught clear biblical thinking on how to navigate your finances. Financial margin. Well, if we really want financial margin, if we see that we need financial margin, the hard work begins here. You have to do something about it. And so I'm asking you to commit to the wisdom of creating an emergency fund. So remember, it's about people. Remember, we got to save and stay within our means. But here's another remember, that God provides what you need. We know that. There's a lot of faith in that sentence. The Apostle Paul was grooming young Timothy to be the next generation leader in the first century church and passing the faith along and grooming that next generation. He had a passage in a book he wrote called 1 Timothy that deals with finances. It is chock full of wisdom. You should read this every day this week. Here we go, 1 Timothy 6. Yet true godliness with contentment is itself great wealth. After all, we brought nothing with us when we came into the world, and we can't take anything with us when we leave it. So if we have enough food and clothing, let us be content. But people who long to be rich fall into temptation and are trapped by many foolish and harmful desires that plunge them into ruin and destruction. For the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil. And some people, craving money, have wandered from the true faith and pierced themselves with many sorrows. A lot of truth there. I wasn't fishing for any of these stories, but two stories came to me this week that definitely apply here. Do you know that God gives you what you need, provides what you need? There was a Kenyan Ridger who had been unemployed for a year and connected in our church, serving in a group. And as he started applying for jobs, he applied for the jobs that he's qualified for, Tier 1 opportunities, and put in his application, had good stuff on his application, nothing. And so after a season, there was some humility that said, okay, I'll apply for jobs I'm overqualified for. And so there were some Tier 2 kind of jobs, and that amazingly was very dry as well, until finally there was a hit and process, and he was anticipating the phone call to say, this is when you start work. And he got the phone call, but it wasn't about that. There was a twist. It was unexpected, and the twist was, we made a mistake, and we already hired somebody for that spot. There's not a job. So in the course of this year and that journey and that disappointment, there was a family member who was watching, and the family member not a Christ follower. And all along was just saying, where's God, where's your God, where's your God? And after this last disappointment, where is your God now? So coming from the skeptical side, that's a tough question. For the person who's been going a year, that's a tough question. Where is God now? Next day, he got a phone call from an application that he had submitted the year previously, right at the beginning, for a dream job that he was very qualified for. It's what he really wanted, but he heard nothing from them until that phone call. And that phone call was, hey, we love your resume. We always have. We wanted to hire you. We didn't have anything available, but now we do. Do you want the job? And he said, yeah. And it's kind of a God thing. And as we listen to that story, there's a couple things that are very human responses. And one of them is, God, why did it take a year? And I don't know. God knows more than we do, and we have to trust him. That's what's involved in here. God gives you what you need. Do you trust him? And maybe God was doing something that other people would notice his faith and his faithfulness. And maybe there was something there. Maybe God was doing something in his own character of trusting God at a deeper level. I don't know what the rest of the story is, and in heaven we might understand it. But all I know is that God is faithful, and God gives you what you need. Another Ridger had been working at a gaming property for 14 years. And the working environment was kind of toxic and really a tough boss to work for. But she liked what she did, and she had been faithful. Unexpectedly released from the job. Boom. Such a shock. Out of the blue. Well, 2 days before she was released, she was at the second job she worked at, another place that she worked part-time and enjoyed, pleasurable place to work. And they approached her and said, man, we love what you do. Would you like to work here full-time? So that happened on Wednesday, and on Friday she got released. And you're sitting there going, what's up with that? A couple things never happened before right there. Now, we believe that God provides what you need. Do you believe that God provides what you need? And what we struggle with, is this a need or a want? So keep asking that question. Is this a want or a need? You see, when we prioritize our needs and we focus our money there and we put our wants in a category that we save for until we can, it's amazing how God shows up and makes that happen. That God provides our needs. Do we trust him? We do our part, save and live within our means. He does his part. He provides what we need. Now, this is heavy stuff, but it's so important. Are we focused on temporary or eternal? Do we remember that he provides what we need? Are we committed to save and live within our means? And if we leave here this weekend with that, we're really ready to do the heavy lifting for creating financial margin in our life. But there's more. What I want to conclude with is a vision cast. I want you to see something because you may not see it now, but I want you to see the impact. The vision of a life with financial margin. Now you say, I've always been able to think about it. No. I want you to think about it like this is your future. This is your future as God leads you and guides you and grows you. And it may take you 18 months to 36 months to get out of debt, which is the norm for the financial peace people. It may take you a season because this is transformation or a journey it's going to take discipline and encouragement and prayer. But when you get to the promised land of financial margin, why? What's the big deal? Well, less stress, less burden, more intentionality, all that's really good. But there's more. And the vision I want you to see, I'm going to vision cast out of a Bible story that's incredibly familiar to us. It's one that our culture knows and understands, and the title of it is something that everybody knows. And it's the parable of the Good Samaritan. And the Good Samaritan is significant because it's a masterful story that Jesus told, and it's told in response to the question, who's my neighbor? And the Jews and the Samaritans did not get along, and Jesus was making sure that everybody understood everybody's our neighbor. And so he made the bad guys Jewish people and the good guy the enemy. It's a classic way to spin the story. And so this guy was going to Jericho, was beat up, left to die on the side of the road. A holy guy saw the guy on the side of the road, went around him, didn't have the time. Another holy guy, saw him on the road, dying, didn't want to get dirty. And then the third guy was the Samaritan, and he stopped. Let's pick up the story in verse 33 of chapter 10 of Luke. Then a despised Samaritan came along, and when he saw the man, he felt compassion for him. Going over to him, the Samaritan soothed his wounds with olive oil and wine and bandaged them. Then he put the man on his own donkey and took him to an inn, where he took care of him. The next day he handed the innkeeper 2 silver coins, telling him, "Take care of this man, and if his bill runs higher than this, I'll pay you the next time I come here." Classic story, but what I want you to notice is the Good Samaritan had financial margin to help. Have you ever been over here where you see a need? Man, if I had the money, I'd help. But I don't have the money, so I'm off the hook. Can you see yourself in a position where you are financially prepared to help? And if you do respond to a need and help personally, and God uses you to impact a life because you were prepared financially to help somebody in a financial need or crisis, you're changing the world. God is using you to change the world. But if we don't have margin, we can't help, and we feel bad, but we feel like we're off the hook. And what if you got on the hook for God to use to change the world? That's a vision. And when you do change the world, I wonder how the Good Samaritan felt as he left the inn, knowing that this stranger he helped is going to recover and he's got it. There's a sense of joy. There's a sense of partnership with God. There is a full, deep, and abundant life that we live when we follow God's ways and do it his way. And all of us can be prepared to help. When somebody comes to us and says, I'm going on a mission trip, could you? Yes. When somebody says, I'm going to go to a mission field and stay for 10 years to life, yes. When there's a need, something that you find in your small group that someone is struggling, they need this, and you, yes. That we show up prepared to give. Jesus said in Luke 6, give and you will receive. Your gift will return to you in full, pressed down, shaken together to make room for more, running over and poured into your lap. The amount you give will determine the amount you get back. To have margin to handle the next unexpected emergency with an emergency fund, to have the margin to say yes to the next opportunity if I only had the money, the margin to respond to the need if I only had the money. Can you see that in your future in a community of followers of Jesus, all available to respond to financial needs when they rise? Whoa, that would be awesome. Can you see financial margin in your future? So what step of faith do you need to take? What step of faith, meaning can you see that for you? That's a step of faith. Lord, help me to believe that financial margin can be in my life. When I was younger and paycheck to paycheck, I didn't see that. Now, looking back, I see it because I follow God's ways, but some of you don't even see it yet. Take a step of faith in that direction. For some of you, a step of perspective. Do whatever you need to do. You may not need to get a rubber stamp with temporary on it, but what is going to remind you that stuff is temporary, people are eternal, and I'm going to focus more of my resources for eternity? What step of discipline do you need to take? Delaying gratification and saving up for purchases. Following through with a budget you set up and the discipline that will take. What step of discipline do you need to take? What step of trust? Knowing that God will provide what I need. What step of generosity? Where you're prepared to respond to financial needs and making a financial impact. It's a tough lesson, critical, important. What's your next step? Let's stand together to pray. God, as we stand here, we are aware that there are people here hurting financially, that being overwhelmed and paycheck to paycheck and maybe even a season of no paycheck. God, I'm grateful that you know exactly where we are and you know what we need. God, I pray for the courage to take the next step in the direction of you in some way. Give them courage. God, for those of us that need to take bold steps of discipline and living within our means and separating our wants and our needs, and prioritizing all that, that's going to take work. I pray that we will not leave here and forget it, but we will leave here and go to work. The kind of work that will involve you and that you will grow us. God, be with everyone who takes a step of faith at Financial Peace University or some other budgeting plan. I pray for the people in their life groups or in their support networks that can encourage them. God, we pray for just the way that we can see the promised land of how you can use us to make a difference financially because we're prepared to. And I pray that more and more of us, one at a time, will step into that kind of freedom. And God, I'm grateful that you're a God who loves us so deeply that you give us what we need when we need it, and that there's this relationship of dependence upon you all the time. Help us to think on these things and to live them out this week as we leave this place. In Jesus' name, amen. Prayer down front or in the lobby, connect at the corner. Bring busy people with you next weekend. God bless.